Good afternoon, staff, students, and the wider Dripstone community. Welcome to 2020 ANZAC Day Assembly.
While we're commemorating ANZAC Day a little differently this year, we'd like to remind you that this is a special occasion and it is a time where we honour those who have gone before us.
I ask you to please remove your hats, please do not applaud, and please do not talk. Phones should remain in silence and should not be used during assembly. I now invite Maria to deliver the acknowledgement of country.
I'd like to acknowledge that this assembly is held on the traditional lands of the Larrakia people and pay my respects to the elders both past and present.
We now invite Gus and Kesha to talk about the ANZAC spirit.
We know that things have been different this year.
Our lives have changed and we have had to adapt together to help keep our community safe from the coronavirus.
But forged on the shores of Gallipoli was the ANZAC spirit. It is this spirit that lives on in the hearts of Australians today. Charles Bean wrote that ANZAC stood and still stands for reckless valour in a good cause, for enterprise, resourcefulness, fidelity, comradeship, and the endurance that will never own defeat.
Arthur Burke, an Order of Australia recipient, points it out that the spirit of ANZAC is not confined to the battlefield, nor is it something that can be seen. He described the spirit of ANZAC as a powerful driving sensation that can only be felt. It is a feeling that burns in the heart of every Australian and New Zealand countryman. A warm, tender, fiery, even melancholy ideal that nurtures intense patriotism in the innermost soul of every body.
The Returned and Services League of Australia suggests that the spirit of ANZAC is still seen today in times of crisis or hardship. During cyclones, floods and bushfires, Australians come together to rescue one another, to ease suffering, to provide food and shelter, to look after one another, and to let the victims of these disasters know that they are not alone.
So today, as we remember, we acknowledge that the ANZAC spirit is still with us and will help us get through these difficult times.
I now invite Dashi and Gabby to read the Requiem.
On this day, above all days, we remember those Australian men and women who died or suffered in the great tragedy of war.
On the morning of April 25th, 1915, Australian and New Zealand troops landed at Gallipoli under fire. And it was then and in the violent campaign which followed that the ANZAC tradition was forged. The elements of that tradition have inspired and offered an enduring example to later generations of Australians.
Each year we pay homage not only to those original ANZACs, but to all who died or were disabled in their service to this country. They enrich our nation's history. Their hope was for the freedom of mankind, and we remember with pride their courage, their compassion and their comradeship. They served on land and sea and in the air and many places throughout the world.
Not only do we honour the memory of all Australians who have fallen in battle, we share the sorrow of those who have mourned them and all who have been the victims of armed conflict.
On this day, we remember with sympathy those Australians who have suffered as prisoners of war, or those who, because of war, have had their lives shortened or handicapped. We recall staunch friends and allies, and especially those of the first ANZAC Day.
May we and our successors prove worthy of their sacrifice.
I'll now invite Nathan to read the poem In Flanders Fields by J. McCrae.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
ANZAC Day can be a personal day of remembrance for many. Today we have staff members and students who would like to share who they will be remembering this ANZAC Day.
This ANZAC Day, I'll be remembering Private James Charles Martin. He was the youngest Australian who died in World War I, and The reason I'm remembering him this Anzac Day is because of the courage he showed, even at such a young age.
This Anzac Day, I will be remembering the doctors, nurses, and medical staff that worked hard to save countless of lives.
This Anzac Day, I will be remembering all the brave men and women who served for Australia. This Anzac Day, I'll be remembering my great-great-grandfather, Albert Porter, who served in World War I in Europe. He was a medic, and he was awarded for his bravery and persistence after he stayed up all night rescuing people who were wounded after the battle.
This Anzac Day, I'll be remembering the unknown soldier because he represents all of the Australians who have been killed in the war.
This Anzac Day, I'll be remembering Family John MacDonald because he was killed during action trying to fight for our country.
This Anzac Day, I'll be remembering the selflessness of all Australian men and women who served.
My grandfather was born in 1887 in Broken Hill. He enlisted in the AIF at the age of 27 in Adelaide with the 10th Battalion. He then went to Gallipoli in World War I in 1915 and served there until the 9th of January 1916, the evacuation date. He died on my first birthday. After Gallipoli, he sailed for Alexandria, Egypt. He was then transferred to the Western Front in March 1916. For the next 2.5 years, he took part in trench warfare in France and Belgium until the armistice in 1918, being wounded on 2 occasions. He died on my first birthday. He returned to Adelaide in September 1919 and was delisted from the AIF in May 1920. He then married his wife, Myrtle Olive, and had 3 children. My father, Raymond, who is now 90 years old, and 2 daughters, my aunties, who are now deceased. He died on my first birthday. I thank him for his service in the AIF in World War I. I never knew him, but I feel very close to him spiritually. His name, William Frederick Salento.
I've always been drawn to the personal stories of sacrifice and the courage and bravery that our Australian men and women show in battle. In 2017, I was chosen as a teacher chaperone for the NT Chief Minister's ANZAC Spirit Study Tour. And in that process of getting ready to head over to the World War I battlefields, I asked my grandmother just to check our family tree again. I had this suspicion, maybe there was someone, or maybe there was a story there to be told. And in diving into our family tree, my grandma found the name Walter Henry East, and next to it in grey lead was written "Killed in World War I." With that information, I was able to research and find out about my great-great-uncle who served both in Gallipoli and on the Western Front. Walter was 27 years of age when he enlisted. He first was sent to Gallipoli. On the 25th of June, he was given a special mention in the Divisional Orders for acts of gallantry and valuable service. So after the evacuation of Gallipoli, he went to the Western Front, where, along with thousands of other men, he suffered through a freezing winter. Despite being hospitalised with trench foot and frostbite, he continued to show remarkable bravery and courage. So in June 1916, he was awarded a military cross for his consistent ability to remain steadfast and step up and lead when needed. He was able to command his battery when under heavy fire, and after his captain and other men were killed beside him. He was awarded a bar to his military cross in 1917, yet he never knew of this. He was killed by shell fragments as he was walking back from an observation post at West Hoke Ridge. I get great comfort in reading it's recorded that one of his men set out to greet him on his way back from that observation post. So potentially, one of the last things that he would have seen would be his friend walking towards him. When I was on the Western Front with the students, we were lucky enough to have a day where we could go and visit Walter's resting place. So behind this little village, Rylinghurst, we found the cemetery where he lays. Walking through a field, there were cows. So there isn't words to describe what an emotional day this was. Standing at the resting place of someone who is my relative, emotions overcome me. When it was time to leave, it really hit me that he had to stay here. He didn't come home in life or in death. So he stays there with his men in a field. I cannot imagine the sense of loss and grief that his family would have felt over 100 years ago, not having him come home. I'm proud to be his great niece, and I'm inspired by the sacrifice that he gave. Tomorrow, on ANZAC Day, I'll wear his medals with pride, and I'll remember his sacrifice, lest we forget.
This year we can't pay tribute to the ANZACs in the ways we usually would. So we're keeping the ANZAC spirit alive in different ways. I'm doing my bit today by sharing with you an ANZAC story that's close to my heart. The Cav boys are going to be driving into the deep end. It was back in 2007. We will be pushing north to Chora, a known Taliban stronghold. Not bad for our first trip outside the wire. The house that my wife and I were living in, the bedroom was at the front of the house, and we were woken up by someone tapping on the window. It was my dad. Intelligence says it's more than likely we'll be in contact. Let's just wait and see. So I dug myself out of bed and answered the front door, and my dad asked me to come outside. I have confidence in my mates and myself. I reckon it was probably around 6 a.m. I can remember it was still fairly dark, but the sun just starting to creep up. This is what I trained to do, and serve my country, army, and uphold the ANZAC spirit. I'm ready. Since I was young, I can always remember my dad saying that if you've got bad news to give to someone, there's no point laying groundwork for it, you've just got to come out and say it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out so early this morning. It's my sad duty to inform you of the death of an Australian soldier whilst on operations in Afghanistan. The soldier serving with the Reconstruction Task Force was tragically killed and another soldier wounded when a roadside bomb detonated next to their vehicle in Uruzgan province yesterday morning, Afghanistan time.
That was my uncle. Anyone that knew my uncle would be surprised to know that he kept a diary while he was in Afghanistan. The words you saw and heard at the start of this video, they weren't written by me. And to hear him speak about his country and his mates and the ANZAC spirit like that, it's just... So when I tuck my son into bed tonight, I won't be reading him his usual bedtime stories. I'll be telling him about his great uncle who died serving his country. Because one thing is for certain, at the going down of the sun and in the morning,
I now invite Darshi to read the ode.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Please stand for the last purse. The last purse will then be followed by the minute silence, the rouse, and the national anthem. Please remain standing.
let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Thank you for joining us and helping us commemorate ANZAC Day at Dripstone Middle School. We hope that you will take time tomorrow to stop and remember.
In your PL classes, you will now have some creative activities to complete. You can take these home and display it in your window, or you can give them to your PL teacher and we can display them in school.
Lest we forget.